Welcome to Research Matters with Unda and Kuda, an online show that is all about communicating the research taking place at NUST in efforts to promote the university's research agenda and the impact thereof.
Exactly 12 minutes past the hour of 11. If you just logged on, you heard right. It is time for Research Matters right here on NUST FM with Kuda and Unda. And of course, we're having an amazing guest that I see more often than not right here at the Namibia University of Science and Technology. But I'll let my co-host introduce him this morning.
Thank you so much, Unda. As always. So great to be here. Campus is quiet today.
Why are we here? We need to knock off.
Because we love the show and we love our guests. So we had to make sure we were here today.
Yes, we do need to do what we gotta do.
That is awesome. Now today in studio we have Mr. Stephen Visagie. He is a faculty librarian right here at the Namibia University of Science and Technology. Stephen, thank you so much for being with us. It's warm. So I'm sure you're fine with that, right?
Oh, I'm absolutely fine. And thank you very much for having me.
Great. We were pretty excited to have you in studio. Now, let's just dive right into it. What shaped you into the person you are today? Before you answer that, I'm just going to tell you a little quick story. So the moment we put this out to say, okay, we're going to have Stephen in studio and everything, I got an email, from a lecturer who was like, oh, no, great. I love this. I can't miss this. Stephen is the go-to guy at the library.
Oh, you're that guy.
So you've earned that title now. So now we want to know what shaped you into the person you are today.
Flattery will get you anyway.
Tell us.
Well, pretty much the stereotypical reasons. I grew up in a small town, and for me, this was even though I was born in Windhoek, my dad worked for the railway, so we moved around a lot. And then I ended up spending most of my youth growing up in a small town called Vredenburg in the Western Cape, near Saldanha. And one thing that was amazing about this small town was the public library. So I spent a lot of time. I remember being a young boy going on a Wednesday afternoon after school because they would show 8mm movies. And every weekend I would pick up some Nancy Drews and books.
Just wait.
Yeah.
Cruising over that.
What are 8mm movies? You're going to have to take us back.
Oh, you're going to age me now. It's those movies that came, they were circulated by the province. They came in these metal containers, round containers, so it was old film. And then they had a projector that they would set up and a screen they would drop, and we would watch
That's
cartoons.
crazy because I've only seen it on the movies, like where they have that ancient way of watching film. I think that's the
ancient.
Oh, I didn't mean to, Stephen.
Jab.
No, it's pretty ancient. Yeah. But then every weekend I would end up taking out 5 or 6 books, and then I would just spend the whole afternoon on my back reading books and then hand them in again. So, it was a love of reading, which is actually not really a requisite to be a librarian today, because being a librarian today is more about being a teacher and a bit of a technologist. So, the reading was a stereotype, but it got me into the profession, and happily the profession I was able to keep up and change with it as well.
Great. Maybe I would then ask, what type of books did you grow up reading? Because if I think about a time where I was growing up, I looked at books that had more pictures than words, because I'm just trying to get through it and, be imaginative and, not so much get into that depth of having to read, loads and loads of work.
I mean, there was the children's section, and then there was the young adult section in the library. So I was started off with your basic things like your young detective stories and things like that. But then at about the age of 10 or 11, I moved into the adult section, and I picked up The Hobbit. And that got me hooked onto fantasy. And then soon after that, I read The Lord of the Rings. And then I got onto all the other famous fantasy series like the Dragons of Pern and things like that. So, it is still my favorite genre is fantasy and science fiction.
Now, if we looked at how you went from that into, getting into an institution of higher learning and navigating into being a librarian, for example, how did you, is it the love of books that got you into this profession and field, or how did you get here?
Initially, yes. But also, something that I think is escaping us is the benefits that are provided by being a reader. If you look at, for instance, some of your top leaders in the world, like President Obama, every year he puts out a list of the books he's read for that year. CEOs read books. It's the skills that it provides: critical thinking, empathy for other people, all those kind of things. I think we're losing out a lot by students not reading anymore. And it's also, for instance, language acquisition. When I was working in the United Arab Emirates, we had Arab students. We had a lot of English books designed for language learners. And it was one of the best ways for them to build their vocabulary and things like that. So I would love to see reading pushed on this campus as well. I know we've got so many challenges facing us, but it's one that really develops a student, I think. But then I'm biased. I'm a librarian.
No, what did you study? What does one have to study to be in this career?
So at Stellenbosch, I did a 4-year degree in library and information science. So people would say to me, why do you need 4 years for that? So I would say, first year, they would teach us how to take the books off the shelf. Second year, to dust them. Third year, to organize them. Fourth year, to put them back up. But it's much more than that. It is a science. I mean, information comes in very different forms. It needs to be organized. It needs to be distributed. It needs to be preserved. You need to add metadata to it. And with the coming of, more and more electronic information in different forms, we have to work along with it. So it is a real science. Information is like the water running through the pipes, and we're the plumbers. We try to make sure that the system is working.
Yeah. My goodness.
Yeah, quite interesting, hey? Especially when things are put into perspective. You have a better appreciation of the field itself. Now, you mentioned there that you did some work in the United Arab Emirates. How does that compare to Namibia? What can you say was so different? What lessons were learned from that cultural experience?
So much. Before I left, I was working at UNAM, and I was jaded about the profession a bit, and I was in debt, and I was just like, I need an escape. A friend of mine that I had studied with, she'd gone over to United Arab Emirates, and she raved about it. So I took a chance and applied, and was lucky enough to get a job as a librarian at a college in Abu Dhabi, which is the capital. And they had, the students were all male Emirati students. But the staff was made up of people from all around the world. So I was working with Indians, with Filipinos, with Australians, Brits, Americans, you name it. And what was wonderful about that was I was learning from everyone. They were bringing their skills with them, and I was absorbing it like a sponge. So, of course, when I came back, I wanted to do a million things, and then you have to realize, well, maybe the budget isn't there. But as far as I can, I try and apply what I learned over there and bring it here. And so that is also why I think for any academic, a stint of working in other countries is a huge boon. It really opens your eyes to the world and to possibilities that if you had just stayed in Namibia, you're very insular and you don't know what's outside the box.
That's fact.
Yeah, so travel is good.
Maybe then I can look at some of the trends that you've now been able to apply in your workspace, seeing that we're going from being very physical, everything it's tangible, to having data and books on, different platform, e-resources, for example. So maybe you can talk about how have you been able to adjust to all the trends and needing to keep up with the times when it comes to accessing different resources and so forth.
Yeah, well, ebooks, the idea of ebooks, databases have been around for a while. In full text, we've always had those. Ebooks we started off with, but it was very slow. The demand wasn't there, but then COVID came along, and suddenly people weren't allowed to come into the library anymore. So the only way that they could access the books is if we quickly went and bought the textbooks as ebooks, and they could access them. So that actually gave us a boost in that way. But more and more, we find that our vendors, the people that we get our databases from, are applying new technologies. So we want to keep up. And, you don't need to be a programmer. You just need to be interested because these interfaces are so easy. So now, for instance, we can create our own guides very easily without being a webmaster. We've got this package we bought called LibGuides. So now the librarians are actually creating information as well. We're not just using other people's information. We're using DSpace for our archive, for our repository.
Yeah.
So all the theses that are created and speeches and articles and stuff like that can be stored. Now we're building an institutional memory. And all these platforms are coming along like this. And it's really, that's what's got me so interested now is I haven't been in the bookshelves in ages.
Yeah.
I'm working online and I'm creating and information and sharing information and teaching information. And the technology is just opened the floodgates for that.
But would you say there's some challenges that come with that?
Internet bandwidth can sometimes, it's getting better.
Yes.
It's getting better.
Yeah.
But sometimes it does let us down, when someone is trying to search for articles and then
Yeah.
it just hangs and hangs and hangs. Plus, also, a lot of our students are sitting in the regions or they don't have access or they have very slow access.
Yeah.
So then it's not equitable. What the students have in Windhoek is a lot better sometimes than what our students in the region. So we really need to look at improving bandwidth. That is, I would say, the biggest challenge. And then also changing, the youngsters are easy to change. They're born with a cell phone in the hand now.
Facts.
Okay?
Yeah.
But when it comes to perhaps more senior staff,
Yeah.
they find it harder to adapt and change as well. They don't see it as necessary. And meanwhile, the longer we wait to change, the further we fall behind. We have to keep up with the trends.
About that,
Yeah.
maybe just a quick one. Just from your perspective and everything that you've experienced, and I'm sure there's possibly psychological studies to this as to the benefits of really having a physical book that you can read in comparison to something online.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to get to a stage possibly in the near future where hard copies just die out and everything is digital? Look, I know we've got a lot of challenges, as you rightfully said, the digital gaps and so forth, but eventually, what's your take? Are you into physical copies? Do you buy the newspaper physically at a corner on the street, or do you read it online?
I read it online. A few years ago, there was a university in Texas that established a library with not a single physical book in it, a purely digital library. So people are moving in that direction. I think we're always going to have, hopefully, a small core of at least a few physical books, because not all books have been converted to digital yet, and there might still be, or for instance, they're related to our history or our heritage. But in general, the textbook type, the engineering textbooks and things like that, over time, I see them being replaced with electronic copies across the board as we start renewing titles and getting newer issues. Because it's actually our policy now that if a lecturer requests a recommended reading or a prescribed reading, we first look for the ebook, and only if we can't find the ebook do we buy the physical book. So yes, it is. But remember, the library's not going to disappear as a physical space.
Yeah.
The library serves so much more than just a repository for books.
Yeah.
We're a safe space for students to come and learn in comfort, in quiet. Maybe they don't have that facility at home. We can provide activities, group rooms for students to work together and things like that. So as a space, the library is going to always be there. It's just what's inside is going to be changing a little bit.
I like that. But let's take a quick musical break and we'll be back on the flip side with Mr. Stephen right here in studio. But maybe before we go, why did you request this song? It's Kate Bush with Babushka.
Oh, as a student at Stellenbosch, I was a big Kate Bush fan. There's very nice memories attached to it. So I'm a big, it might be silly, but I love it.
Yeah. All right, we'll be back on the flip side. Do enjoy and stick around.
Welcome back. If you've just tuned in, you are listening to Research and Innovation Matters right here on NUST FM with Unda and Kuda. Now in studio today we have Mr. Stephen Visagie. He is a faculty librarian at the university. We're having such an engaging discussion. Yeah, we're really enjoying it. On the break there, sometimes all the juicy stuff happens
Off air.
off air. But we're going to rewind a little bit. You were just talking about the experience, the cultural experience from being in the UAE and then now to Namibia. But what you particularly said that I think the listeners must hear is how you left, like what you needed to do, what you needed to sell, and just literally getting up and taking a chance and going. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so it is a risky proposition because there's also a lot of scams about attracting people
True.
to. Luckily, if I hadn't had a friend that was there already and she was working at the same college, I had a certain level of trust that things were going to be okay.
So that's key, right? At least knowing someone who's been there and they can really give you proper tips and recommendations.
Absolutely. That's also anyone who's anticipating it, doing that. Try and make contact with someone, even if they don't have a personal friend there. Try and meet someone and ask them what it's like, and look at reviews. And I think there's Glassdoor is a site that will evaluate certain employers and things like that. But yes, it was a big leap, but I was also very frustrated. So I was just desperate for something new.
Yeah.
But I must say, when I got there, they do treat the expats, the people there, they provide you with housing, and then they gave me a certain amount of money to go buy furniture and things like that. Well, it's contingent on you doing a 3-year contract. If you leave earlier, you have to pay some of that money back.
Which is fair.
Which is fair. Yeah. But also because housing is so expensive, if the college doesn't help you, you can't afford a flat there. But you know, the colleagues I had there really made me feel welcome. Got me into the system. And what was also nice was UAE is a flight hub, you know, Abu Dhabi and Dubai.
Yeah.
A lot of big airlines. Yes. So it's not hard to fly quickly to Europe or something like that. Plus, they also get it. Within weeks of me being there, I got to attend a Coldplay concert.
Oh, wow.
Living the dream.
Wow.
And then a year later, because I grew up loving Depeche Mode, and I saw Depeche Mode were on tour, and they were doing a tour in Paris.
Yeah.
I organized my holiday in Paris around my Depeche Mode concert, which was amazing.
You really made the most of the opportunity.
You've got to.
Yeah.
But so I really felt I wrung everything I could out of it. But then I also got homesick,
of course.
And then also, you know, every time working on a contract is different from being permanently employed. You know, every 3 years you like, are they going to renew my contract?
Yeah, that anxiety and uncertainty.
And I just couldn't take it after that.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd done enough. I'd made enough of a nest egg. I'd paid off my house in Namibia, and my parents weren't well. I wanted to come back and look after them. So it just felt like the time, and I came back. Yeah.
Which is brilliant. It's as if sometimes you also need to go out in these spaces to also appreciate home more, hey?
You do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's great. Now, Stephen, when I hear your name, I cannot help just think of ORCID, which is the Open Researcher and Contributor ID. The reason for this is because there's so many emails in our inboxes talking about the training that you're doing with ORCID and everything. So we've touched in this show extensively on the innovation side of things, how the library is transforming to A, B, C, and D. But let's get to the research bit. What is ORCID? Why does it even matter? Why is it a thing?
Okay. Well, not to correct you, but it's ORCID.
ORCID. No, thank you. I appreciate. I've heard ORCID. I've heard ORC ID. I've heard. What's the correct one now?
ORCID.
ORCID.
Yeah.
Okay. So Stephen, Mr. ORCID has said it is the ORCID. I got it right. Thank you.
Okay. So let's go a bit backwards about discussing research in general.
Yeah.
Okay. Research is increasingly important. We've heard it from our VC, we've heard it from our DVC from of innovation and research as well.
Yeah.
We really want to push. Now, think about all the work that goes into doing research. It used to be you would do your research, you would publish, you would maybe present about it at a conference, boop, and that was it.
Yeah.
But we have to do so much more now. Researchers need to learn to become self-promoters. They need to, after they've done the research, it doesn't stop there. They need to make sure that research information is appearing on all sorts of social media and platforms, and that they keep pushing it, because there's a number of reasons for that. One of that is the more you promote your research, the more it's going to get downloaded, the more it's going to get used by other people in their research, which pushes up your citation score. All right? The more people that cite your work, it's a score that gets measured. It's called bibliometrics. Now, what that does is, if you're publishing in the right journals and getting these citations, it affects something that every researcher has called an H index. All right. So every researcher should be thinking about, how can I build on my H index? Because H index is very important, for instance, if you apply for research funding.
Yeah.
You have to give you details. They're going to look up what is your H index. You're applying for a job at another university. They might want to know what is your H index, and things like that. So there's all these ways that you do that. Now, for instance, in Scopus, which belongs to Elsevier, a big publisher, that's one of the people. They select the best journals, and then they will only select articles published in those journals, and on that they will work out your H index. There's a competing product called Web of Science from Clarivate. They do the same thing, and they belong to Clarivate, which is a opposing company to Elsevier. Now, what Scopus does is Scopus is a non-profit organization, and they're not beholden to any big publisher. But what they want to do is a number of things. They want you to get an individual ID address. You know, like a book has an ISBN, an individual address, or a journal will have an ISSN, or you will get a unique ID just for you, because there can be there are many people that have the same name.
Yeah.
Or maybe someone got married and their surname changed. How are you going to trace which articles that they publish? So it's a way of making sure that everything a person has done is assembled under a single ID. But as well as above that, you also get a profile that you can fill in. So there you can put in a bit of a bio about yourself. You can add in your Scopus ID. You can add in your Web of Science ID, linking things. You can put in your universities that you studied at, your educational background, things that you have achieved. So if you've become a chair of a department, you can put that in there. If you became Researcher of the Year, you can put that in there, things like that. And then the last thing is your works. All the publications you have done. All right. So that is wonderful. But what's more than that is, anyone can create a CV and put works on there. You can do that in ORCID as well. Put up your. But if you have been publishing with credible journals that are linked to ORCID, so through Crossref or Scopus, it's very technical. But what happens is when you add your works, you add it via a third party. So that's like saying I'm adding credibility. I didn't upload that I wrote this article. A third party did it. Okay. So it adds credibility.
Like an endorsement.
It's an endorsement, exactly. Now, as a researcher, you can get your ORCID ID for free. It doesn't cost you anything. And it doesn't stay with you at NUST. It goes with you wherever you go through your career. The only people who pay are organizations. So these would be university, like us. We're paying for a subscription, funders, journals, and big organizations. Yeah. And when you join like that, we as a university, for instance, get two big advantages. We get to be able to draw statistics. That is why we want everyone at NUST to have an ORCID ID and to fill in where that they work at NUST, because then we can start extracting data. But it only works if everyone takes part. And the second thing that we get is access to 5 APIs. So I'm not a technical person, but APIs...
He keeps saying he's not technical, but he's going deep. I like the disclaimer. I'm not technical, but...
I know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
So what these API do is a connect platform so that they can communicate back and forth. So I'll give you an example. Last week we published the latest edition of our NAWA journal. All right? And we have added the ORCID plugin there because we're now an ORCID member. Yeah. So now when researchers publish with us, the system says, give us permission to add your ORCID ID. So when the article is published, next to the name is their ORCID ID, which is great for them. Someone can click on it and see their whole profile. And it's added by Crossref, so it's added as by a third party, so it adds credibility to it, and it's done automatically. They didn't have to do it. And that's wonderful. We, in turn, get information about the authors that are publishing with NAWA. So, it's about networking. It's about creating. And then there's also other institutions. I was talking about bibliometrics, citations, but there's also something called altmetrics. They are now measuring, for instance, not just what researchers are publishing in journals, but if they are putting it in Facebook, if they are, if it's on social media, if it's they get interviewed by someone on NBC about their research. This is alternative metrics. Oh, wow. And that's being measured as well. Wow. And the companies that do altmetrics are also drawing a lot of that data from ORCID. So, it's a center point for a lot of connections in the academic world. So we're not doing it to irritate people. We just, it's at the end of the day, it's good for the researcher because, if somebody saw a snippet about their research and wanted to know more about them because they wanted them to co-author a paper or a funder wanted to contact them or something like that, there's a perfect venue. It's all there in their ORCID profile if they've done it properly.
And I think that's absolutely profound because sometimes you've done so much, especially the more you gain experience over the years, just even in your own capacity, Unda. I'm sure there's so many things, not necessarily linked to research, I'm just giving this as an example, but in your space, in your field, you've done emceeing here, you've done this there, but now when people say, okay, what have you done? Now you're trying to scratch through to say, okay, I did this and I did this and I did this. Unlike if you have one central place that's really just a digital CV of who you are in the academic space, in research and all of that. I like that bit to also really tie it up with social media because that really speaks to, for me specifically, what I do as a science communicator. It's not only the traditional kind of platforms, the journals, the so forth and everything, which are great, ResearchGate, everything is great, but there's also other things you've done, as you rightfully said. You spoke about your research on NBC and so forth. Where is that? Where do we find that?
And if a lecturer, for instance, is supervising 20 master students, that's one way to sort of like get credit for it, is put it in your ORCID, because then people know you have that skill. If you've been a reviewer for a journal, put that in there. It's a skill that could be used. Someone might need later on. So it's a good. I really think everyone should. Not because we want you to share your information. There's nothing in there that you wouldn't have put in your LinkedIn or something. So we're not asking for confidential stuff. And there is that ability to make certain things confidential in your ORCID profile. But generally, the information should be stuff that you shouldn't be worried about sharing with anyone.
So what are any initiatives? I know you've done some training in the past at the institution just to raise awareness and just to really get into that conversation, to these conversations with people. Why does this matter? And literally physically, even though you're not a technical person, physically helping them really register on this platform, upload their content and how to go about it. Is there anything like that that's coming up?
Constantly. So besides ORCID, we've got other things that we're doing as well. We're working with Crossref to make sure that all our publications have DOIs. It doesn't sound like much, but in the academic world, in libraries, that's important. We're creating guides. We're starting to incorporate AI more and more. I know it must be sounding like everyone's talking about AI, but all our vendors have got programs at the moment where they're working on some aspect of AI. I'll give you an example. Spring and Nature is one of the biggest publishers of scientific journals in the world, and they had a webinar the other day, and they're working on one of the AIs that they're working on is taking very advanced, complicated, highfalutin scientific articles and using an AI, I don't want to use the word dumb it down, but to make it accessible, more accessible language for people in the street. So now people in the street can start understanding what scientists are doing without having to be a scientist themselves. Just think of the value that has. And also how it's going to improve search. At the moment, searching for your databases in the library, you have to use certain terminology, you have to use keywords and things. But imagine if you could use your natural language and an AI could interpret it and try and figure out what it is you're looking for and help you to search. So there's a lot of things that are coming. Every day we almost got an email about some new development.
Mr. Stephen.
She was about to say Stefan. I heard
it was right there, but Kuda, I was trying. Maybe we can look at some of the services that you are more involved in. I know that as a first-year student, you've taught me how to access like e-resources, for example. So what does your day-to-day, look like in terms of just service delivery in the library?
Okay, so
with students and staff.
It's quite cyclical. It changes with whether it's the beginning of the semester or something like that. Because generally at the beginning of the semester, when there's new classes, lecturers want us to get the students onto how to search the library databases, how to tell the difference between good and bad information on the internet, and of course the big plagiarism thing, how to do your APA citation.
Yeah.
So on that is across the board. All the faculty librarians are involved with that. So we do that generally. That's the teaching component. Then also we do specialized sessions, for instance, for lecturers. In September and November, I've got 2 sessions coming up, aimed primarily at postgrad students and lecturers on things like awkward or promoting yourself, on social media and things like that. Okay. So that is what I do as well. I'm creating guides constantly. That is another thing that I enjoy very much. I never thought of myself as much of an author, but they make it so easy. Yeah. So we do that, and then there's always things being thrown at us from the left side. Just, can you do this for us? Lecturers doing their own research, for instance. Can you help me find articles? And then I will send them a whole bunch of articles. Okay. Things like that, yeah. Cool. We're a support. We're there to support as much as we can. We don't take the limelight, but if we can help someone else get into that limelight, we're there to help.
Okay. Wow, I absolutely love that. Normally now when we wrap up the show, I usually ask, okay, what are your hopes for the future? What do you see? And all of that. But today I just want to ask, you've got such a positive aura and a positive energy and just a positive outlook on life. At a time where I feel like we're just in a world sometimes where there's so many things screaming for your attention, whether it's in the digital space, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, we're being asked to do more and more with very limited resources. Just as Stephen Visagie, what keeps you going? What advice would you say to somebody who's like, okay, I'm done. I cannot do this anymore. I'm done. What would you say? What keeps you going?
Of course, there are things about the job that I'm not crazy about. And the monthly statistics, I mean, good grief. But I have to do them. Yeah. But I must say that the library, the management, if you've got an idea, they're very supportive. And they let you run with it. And that keeps me interested because I'm doing things that I love. I found that as well. When I was in high school, I hated school. I had to do subjects I didn't like. So I was an average student. But the moment I got to university and I could choose my subjects, I did so much better because I was interested.
Loved what you did.
Yeah, so for me, doing what you're interested in keeps me going. When I'm told to do things like cataloging or something like that, that kills me. That makes me want to leave the profession. And the first 10 years of my career was like that. But after a while, going to the UAE and then coming to NUST, which is great, I've really fallen in love with the profession again. Yeah.
Keyword is just find something that you love so that you don't feel like it's a drag to do anything. I mean,
exactly.
I also get those moments where I really love the radio, and sometimes I'm even burnt out in the radio, but then I remember that this is a passion, and that just jumpstarts the love all over again. But Mr. Visagie, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for educating us on orchid. Kuda, did you hear that?
Orchid, I said it right, orchid.
All right, but that brings us to the end of this amazing episode. You can catch the next episode of Research Matters with Unda and Kuda by following the Research Innovation and Partnerships at NUST pages. That is on Facebook as well as LinkedIn, and you can follow us on NUST FM as well. That is the Facebook and Instagram account. Now, our other podcasts are up on our YouTube channel. That is the NUST YouTube channel, so you can catch up on previous episodes that we've done right here. But that is the end. I'm leaving you the sounds of 10cc. I'm Not in Love, another request by Mr. Stephen right here in studio. Do stick and stay to NUST FM.